Those of you who are online, if you would like to purchase a book and have it personalized by Mr. Grabenstein, call the number on your screen and we will ship it to you for free wherever you are in the U.S. during the programming. We look forward to hearing from you. It's been a great treat to have Chris Grabenstein with us this evening. It is an honor to have him here at Books and Books. It is wonderful to see how much of a new generation he is inspiring and entertaining in his new middle grade series of the Mr. Lemoncello's Library. But let's have someone from the new generation do the honors. We will have Miss Liv, our honorary and fearless bookseller, introduce Mr. Chris Grabenstein.
Hey. Yeah, here. Okay, hi. Thank you, Ketsia. Good evening. I'm excited to be here today to meet and introduce Mr. Grabenstein because I'm a huge fan of the Lemoncello series. When I read the first book in the series, Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library, I was entangled in Kyle Keeley's world. I read the book in 2 days and was sad when I finished it, so I made sure that one of my best friends, also named Kyle, read the book too, because the next best thing to reading a great book is sharing one. Two of the many reasons I love the Lemoncello series are the crazy games and library contraptions that Mr. Grabenstein describes with such detail. My favorite scenes in his books are whenever he describes the Rotunda Reading Room's silence and the Electronic Learning Center's smelly video games. Mr. Grabenstein doesn't make the library overly fantastical, but something that could be a real place where real children go. My favorite quote from the series is, "A library doesn't need windows. We have books, which are windows into worlds that we never dreamed possible." Thank you, Mr. Grabenstein, for introducing us to a world that we never dreamed possible, but love visiting. So, when's book number 3 coming out? Thank you.
Well, yes, we'll have to talk about book number 3. Save that question for later. I want to apologize a little bit. My voice is a little hoarse because I've been traveling around this great country of ours, talking to children for the last 2 weeks, and we put on quite a silly show when we go to schools, and I do too many funny voices. But how many of you guys here have read the first Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library? Interesting, good. So you know most of the characters. Won't be any spoiler alerts going on here because this is the sequel, the follow-up book. And you know, the number one question I get asked when I go around to schools, they say, where do you come up with your ideas? And this idea for this book, I can say I got from a 5th grader. I got this idea from a 5th grader I was doing a Skype with, and he had read the first book, Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library, and he said, I bet that Charles Chiltington has the worst Christmas vacation of his life. He has to sit at home and watch all those kids who beat him starring in Mr. Lemoncello's commercials. I bet he has the worst vacation ever. And I said, oh, this kid's right. I could immediately picture Charles Chiltington sitting in his family's big home theater watching all the people who beat him up on the TV screen. And I said, oh, yeah, I bet kids all over the country would be jealous and say, who are these kids? Why did they get a chance to play in this game and we didn't? And then they find out, oh, only kids in Alexandriaville, Ohio got to play. And kids all over the country would say, this is not fair. We demand a rematch. And that's what happens, is that Mr. Lemoncello gets bags and bags of letters, and he gets emails, and they're just dragging in letters like Miracle on 34th Street and dumping them on him. And he says, you know, these kids are right. We should have another game. And so he announces the first ever Library Olympics, which will take place on March 20th, the first day of spring, because those other Olympics already have the winter and summer games. But, oh, look, the book is right here. Oh, see, I cleverly put it up there. Wasn't that clever? I thought, excuse me, I would share with you that chapter, excuse me, inspired by the 5th grader. This is Charles Chiltington. This is chapter 2 of Mr. Lemoncello's Library Olympics. Charles Chiltington sat in his family's home theater watching his classmate Kyle Keeley rocking across a 70-inch plasma screen TV. It was the worst Christmas vacation of his life. For over a month, whenever he clicked on the television, Charles was forced to look at the 5 cheaters who, 6 months earlier, had robbed him of his rightful prize. In that night's Lemoncello commercial, Keeley, the ringleader of the group that had defeated Charles in the escape from Mr. Lemoncello's library game, looked ridiculous, dressed up in goofy goggles like a flying squirrel. But Keeley was obviously having a grand time starring in the commercial. A commercial Charles should have starred in. Keeley had needed 4 teammates to best Charles in the past June's escape game, which was played inside the silly Game Maker's even sillier new library on its opening weekend. Keeley had also needed Mr. Lemoncello's help to win. At the very last second, just as Charles was nearing victory, the batty billionaire disqualified him on a trumped-up technicality. Keeley and his cronies went on to win the game and the grand prize. Charles, on the other hand, went home to hear what a disappointment he was to his father. Because Chiltingtons never lose, especially not to ordinary nobodies like Kyle Keeley. For 6 months, Charles had been plotting his revenge on Keeley and his teammates, smart aleck Akimi Hughes, library geek Miguel Fernandez, bookworm Sierra Russell, and most especially turncoat trader Haley Daly, who had been on Charles's team with Andrew Peckelman until she deserted them to join Team Kyle. Mr. Lemoncello robbed me, Charles muttered miserably. They should shut down his ludicrous library. He'd been miserably muttering the same thing ever since the Lemoncello holiday commercial started airing. But for some reason, watching this annoying squirrel commercial made a new thought bubble up inside his brain. He pushed the pause button on the DVR remote. They should shut down Mr. Lemoncello. That was a better idea. The good citizens of Alexandriaville, Ohio, should not allow the demented Mr. Lemoncello to continue to control what went on inside their new public library. Yes, his mind started worrying. That was the perfect angle, a public campaign to wrench control of the library away from the dangerous lunatic Luigi Lemoncello. And Charles knew just who should lead the charge. His mother. She had a long history of championing public causes. When he was in kindergarten, she had led the anti-cupcake crusade because Charles liked brownies better. When he was in 3rd grade, his mother had made certain that the teacher who dared give Charles a B on his papier-mâché volcano was fired. And in 4th grade, she had yanked him out of Chumley Prep and cut off their endowment when the private school had the nerve to hire a history teacher who celebrated International Talk Like a Pirate Day. Plus, Charles's mother did not particularly care for what Mr. Lemoncello was doing inside his zany library. Too much sizzle, not enough steak, she'd complain to friends in her bridge club. They also lend out too many of the wrong sort of books. Wheels were spinning inside Charles's head as he plotted his next moves. With just the slightest nudge, taking the Lemoncello out of the Lemoncello library would become his mother's next great cause. He was certain of it. "Mummy," he called out in his best "your little boy has a boo-boo" voice. When no one answered, he did it again, louder. "Mummy, make it go away. I'm being traumatized. Mummy." His mother bustled into the TV room. "Charles, darling, what's the matter?" Charles pointed a trembling finger at the TV screen. "Mr. Lemoncello, make him go away. His library's a petrifying place full of cheaters." "I know, dear, but there's nothing." Charles started blubbering. "He cheated me, Mummy. He robbed me." Yes, honey, it was time to pull out the heavy artillery. "He lowered my self-esteem. I feel like such a failure," he sniffled. "Because of Mr. Lemoncello, I may never go to college." His mother's face turned ghostly white. "Score. Hush now. Mummy's here. Everything will be all right." She hugged him tightly. Charles grinned. Mr. Lemoncello was toast. Burnt toast with toe jam jelly on top. So thank you to the 5th grader who gave me that idea. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So the games get started, and kids from all over the country come. I think there's some kids from Florida who actually come. And there's like 6 or 7 regional competitions, and the teams all come to Ohio, and they're going to play 12 games in the Duo Decimal Thon, which is what a 12-game thing would be, because it sounds like Dewey Decimal System. And There are all sorts of library games, and whoever wins the most medals will be crowned the true champions of the library. But as the games continue, some of the books that the kids need to play the games start disappearing off the shelves. We don't know what's going on, but the kids have got to figure out the mystery of why certain books are no longer on the shelves. And that's all I'm going to tell you about this new book, Mr. Lemoncello's Library Olympics. And to answer your question, there will be a third Lemoncello book. I've already written it, and it's called Mr. Lemoncello's Great Library Race, but I don't think it'll be out for maybe another year. Probably another year. So that'll be exciting. Do any of you have questions you wanted to ask about Mr. Lemoncello? Oh, I'm sure. Yes, back there. Why is he named Lemoncello? It's a very good question. There are several answers, or for several reasons. The first one is it's a beverage that many school teachers like to drink. And the next one is that there's a lot of alliteration going on. Have you studied alliteration in school, where it all has like the consonant sounds? So Mr. Lemoncello's library has all those great L sounds, so it sounds better than Mr. Poindexter's library. But the main reason it's called Mr. Lemoncello is because when I worked on the first book, I sort of made a list of why do we still need public libraries. And at the top of that list for me was it's a great place for immigrants newly arrived in this country to find out about America or keep in touch with their old country. And that meant a lot to me because my Greek grandparents, especially my Greek grandmother, she escaped from Greece when she was 17 years old. The Turks were burning down her village, and she got on a boat filled with refugees, and the British sailors were going to take them somewhere safe. But then there was a cholera epidemic on that boat, and the British sailors said, no one is leaving this boat. And my grandmother was a 17-year-old girl. She said, I'm leaving this boat. And in the middle of the night, when the clouds blocked out the moon, she climbed down an anchor rope off that boat, swam to shore, got with some other refugees, made her way across Europe, somehow got to America, got to Canton, Ohio, which is why the story takes place in Ohio. And my mother was the first one of her family born in America, and she said when she was a kid, she said, I'm going to read every single book in the Canton, Ohio Public Library because that will make me more of an American. So that's a really long way of telling you that my Greek grandparents' name was Lemonopoulos. So Mr. Lemoncello is my tribute to my Greek grandparents because if my grandmother had not climbed down a rope when she was 17 years old, I would not be sitting in New York City today making up silly stories about libraries. Yes?
Inspired you to write this book?
The first book, Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library, I got the idea. Kind of two things inspired it. One was I was doing a lot of school visits for my haunted mystery books and my Riley Mack books I've done, and I started meeting all these great media specialists and libraries who are a lot different than the ones I had when I was your age. When I was your age, librarians were protecting the books from children. They were like, no sticky fingers, keep your sticky fingers off the books. Or they'd say, be quiet, you might wake up the books. Shh. And I started going to all these schools, and the librarians were kind of fun. And the library is like the fun center of the whole school. And kids would come in and say, oh, I read this Rick Riordan book last night. And the librarians would say, oh, here's 6 other books you might like. And I did not have librarians like that growing up. So I wanted to pay tribute to all the librarians in the country that I've met who have made reading fun, because I'm a firm believer that the more something is fun, the more of it gets done. Me and Mary Poppins think the same way. But the true inspiration came when I was at a school in Brooklyn, New York called PS10, which was just an ordinary-looking Brooklyn school. They all look the same. They're a red brick. They're 4 stories tall. But they had a magnificent new library that had been donated by a wealthy benefactor. And I started going, oh, what if a rich, kind of crazy game maker donated a library to the town where he grew up? So that was sort of the dual inspiration for the book. Yes?
When did you start writing?
I started writing when I was in the 5th grade. What grade are you in? You got 1 year. 5th grade, I was kidding. Yeah.
How did you come up with the challenges that the characters competed in?
All the challenges in the Library Olympics? I don't know, I started looking around. Like, I've gone to some librarian conferences where they do these library cart drill teams, where like they'll put on shows where they all push drill library carts. That's really kind of hysterical. Yes, Google it, ALA, library cart drill team, and they're kind of fun. So I had some library cart races, and then I put in some first lines, like can you name the book from the first lines? And I had a lot of association with people doing Battle of the Books, so I started looking at some of the questions they ask and how could I do that. And then as the book progresses, you might notice that the games become more about banned books. Mwah. Suspense thickens. Who else had a question? I saw some other. Yes.
Yes, Jackson. I remember doing
Did your parents have anything to do with the inspiration of these books?
my parents have anything. Yes, my mother.
Especially because when I was 22 years old, my father was a chemical engineer. They're very rational, logical people. And I decided when I was 22 years old that I'm going to move to New York City to be a writer and an actor. And my father said, really, what are you going to do? No, you're not going to do that. He said, do you have a job? No, but I've got $1,000 and a typewriter. That's all I need, Dad. And he said, no, seriously, you got a place to live? No, my buddy Bill says I can sleep on his couch for a week. And do you have a job? No, but I'll find one because I'm going to be a writer and an actor. And my dad was like, oh my gosh. It's like, but my mother, being Greek, said, go, do it. If you don't do it now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. So she's had a couple books dedicated to her because she really encouraged me to go and do and not go, oh, I wish I'd gone to New York when I was 22 years old to try something. So yes, they've helped me quite a bit. And the line in Mr. Lemoncello's library, because my mom had 5 boys in 7 years, so she was often saying, if you boys are bored, go play a board game. That line in Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's library was said by my mother before anybody else said it. Yes?
This book yet, but will there be a challenge like in the first one? Where there's
Yes, there is another
secret puzzle in the second book, and if you solve it, you send an email to me. And what we'll do, we did this with the first book. For the first year of publication, all the people with the right answers, we're going to put your names in a hat. And on January 5th, 2017, 1 year later, after the book came out, we'll draw one name out. And whoever the winner is of all the people who got the answer right, we'll send you 2 libraries of books. So it'll be every book I've ever written for kids, 2 copies. And my friends at Random House will grab 2 copies of every book they can. So one you get to keep, and one you should donate to your favorite school or public library. We did that last time with because when the hardcover came out of Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's library, it didn't have the bonus clue in the back that sort of told you how to solve it. And I think only 200 or 300 people solved it. And we sent 80 pounds of books. Yeah, we sent
It ended up being
a librarian in California who won, and she donated both libraries to libraries. So that was kind of nice. But I remember taking 80 pounds of books to the UPS store. A lot of books, Yes. So solve the puzzle. I think it's a little easier this time. And there's a hidden puzzle in the third book, too. Because I got to put the hidden puzzles in. Everyone's having fun solving those. Any other questions? Yes.
your favorite book?
My favorite book
Is Bud Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis. Have you ever read that one?
The one that the Olympics one?
And they mentioned Bud Not Buddy. I think it's Sierra Russell's favorite book. I wonder why. Funny how that works out that way. Yeah, so that's there's a great website because I was
a reluctant reader as a kid, and I still am to this day. If I read a book and it's like boring in the first page or two, I'll go, okay, and that's it for that one. I'll put them on, okay, yeah, this is boring. And so there's a great website called Read Kiddo Read that James Patterson started, and every book on that website is guaranteed to be a page turner. And so I'm a reluctant reader, so I go to that website and I'm like, oh, and that's where I found Bud Not Buddy. It became my favorite book. And then I got to meet Christopher Paul Curtis at an author event, and I'm like, oh, I was like such a big fan of his. Yes, in the back.
Were all of the books that you mentioned in your books your favorite books?
No, I think most of the books, I try to get a list of all the books that are considered the greatest middle grade books ever, the Newbery Award winners and the Caldecott winners and things like that. So I had those lists on my walls. If you ever go to my website, you can see pictures of my office when books are under construction. It's a mess. And I had those lists all over the walls, and I would like go to those lists. And some of the books I just used because I needed them for specific answers for puzzles and stuff. But in the second book, I'm putting a lot of my friends' books in it. It was kind of fun. Yes.
Working on any new books with James Patterson?
yes.
James Patterson and I have a whole new series comes out in March, actually. It's being highly recommended for like mother-daughter book clubs. It's called Jackie Haha. It's about a funny girl who grows up to be a famous comedian, and sort of her story as a kid in the 1990s. And then we have another iFunny book coming out next year, and a third House of Robots, and a fourth Treasure Hunters, and another iFunny. Did I say that? And then there's like 2 or 3 other things that he hasn't announced yet that we're working on. So that's cool. And I have my own new series coming out, an illustrated series called Welcome to Wonderland, Home Sweet Motel, that takes place here in Florida, which is kind of cool because as a kid, my grandparents, my Greek grandmother and grandfather, eventually moved to St. Petersburg. And we used to come down here all the time when I was a kid. Now my mother lives in St. Petersburg, so this new book is all about a boy who lives with his mother and his grandfather in a motel on St. Pete Beach, and it's like an old school Florida motel with the big statues, of like the alligator out front and the dinosaur. He like collects tchotchkes from all over roadside America stuff. And he started his motel, Walt Wilkie's Wonderland, in 1970, 1 year before the other Walt opened Disney World. And he always tells his grandson, "We had a very good year, PT, a very good year." So there's always been on like hard times, and in this book, a loan comes due or something. They've got to save the motel. And fortunately, there's a very smart girl who's just moved into the motel, who's really good at business. She could be on Shark Tank and win. So it's going to be pretty cool. And it comes out in October, and I've already written the second book, so they want a lot of those like fast. So it's going to be kind of fun. Same 8 to 12, the same as my brain, 8 to 12 up here. 8 to 12. Who else has a question? Anybody? Oh.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. There's a hair or a hand.
Can you tell me, this is more of an adult question, but your writing process, how do you?
Well, I'm a very
boring person when I'm not traveling. I'm a Virgo, so I always do exactly the same thing every day. I get up and I walk my dog Fred for 30 minutes, and I think about ideas for a story. Then I go to the gym and run a little bit. Then I come home and I eat an egg white on English muffin sandwich, and then I sit down and I try to write 2,000 words every day. And I start every day by going over the 2,000 words I wrote the day before, mostly just to get back into the story, because when you're a writer, you'll find that it's almost like dreaming while you're awake. So it almost takes like 20 minutes to get back into that trance state. So it's like, so I do over those 2,000 words, and then the characters are talking to me again, and then we move forward 2,000 words, and that takes like 4 to 6 hours, depending on what kind of scene it is. And then we're done. And then I come back the next day and do the same thing. And if I do that every day consistently for like 25 days, then I'll have a first draft. And I do now, since I'm trying to write so many books at the same time. I actually kind of base my outlines on movie outlines, which is kind of interesting. I have a plot system that I use, and I'll spend like a week now making a really detailed outline, and then when I start writing, it all changes. It always does, like, oh, that's not what's going to happen. Yes, ma'am.
When you were a kid, did you like reading and writing?
I liked reading and writing a lot when I was a kid, because I wasn't good at anything else. I was terrible at sports, and my dad wanted me to be good at sports, like play football or baseball, and we used to play kickball. At recess, they would roll the ball at my foot, and I would swing 3 times and miss. I'm the only person I've ever met who could strike out swinging, playing kickball. And so I was terrible at sports, but in 5th grade is when I started doing little comic books, and I would pass them around to my friends, and they all start laughing, or I'd write skits for my friends for our talent shows at school, and that's kind of like, oh, there's another way to be cool. So I really did like writing, and I like reading, too. And I also liked watching, I really liked reading was Mad Magazine when I was a kid. I read Mad Magazine. That taught me a lot about the power of words and how you can use words to do satire or to knock the stuffing out of people, And because I was the kind of kid who was picked on by bullies, and so I developed a sense of humor, and I could use words to fight back, just like Jamie Grimm in the iFunny books. Yes.
Wanted to give up?
Did I ever want to give up writing?
Sometimes you do. Every writer I've met will say that like 3/4 of the way while you're writing a book, because you start out, I got this great idea, and you get going, you do the outline, you get going, 3/4 of the way through, you go, this is the worst piece of garbage anyone's ever written. This stinks. And it's fine because I've gotten to know a lot of the mystery authors behind me here, like Charlene Harris and people like that, and they all say the same thing. 3/4 of the way through, they go, this is terrible. No one's going to want to read this. I don't want to read it. But then you go, well, maybe I could do this one thing, and you find the courage to get back up and keep going. So there is a lot of, because it's kind of hard. You're all by yourself, and you don't know if it's any good because no one's read it yet, and no one's laughing at it, but you just keep going. I used to have Chinese dinner once. I had a fortune cookie, and I saved the fortune because it said get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8. So it doesn't matter if you get knocked down. It matters whether you get back up. So when you get discouraged, just kind of take a break, then get back up and keep trying. Keep trying. Yes?
Earlier that I really enjoyed the audiobook, listening with my children of the first Lemoncello's library. Have you contracted for movies or like a Netflix series? Because I was driving and I could visualize the whole world. It was really wonderful.
Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's library has been optioned by
Nickelodeon to become a made-for-TV movie for Nickelodeon, and we're this close to having it actually come true. It's like this close. Because a lot of stuff gets optioned and nothing ever happens, but they've been like, oh, it's looking good. It's looking good. Can I tell it? No, it's looking good. So I'm supposed to find out in the next month or 2. So stay tuned to my Facebook page. I'll be doing this kind of dance on my Facebook page.
Full episodic television. Like
Disney, are you watching? You're listening right now. Yeah, they'd be great.
And also the Island of Dr. Libris has been optioned to become a movie too. So that's kind of yes, back there.
Will there be more Island of Dr. Librises?
I think there might be. We haven't decided for sure
yet. I think they're waiting to see what the sales are like when the sequel comes out. So it's all up to you, children. Please buy many copies of the Island of Dr. Libris. So I think there probably will be because it was a bestseller and things like that. But I don't know for sure yet. Don't know. Yes.
Can you share what it's like to go through the editing process once you've written the book?
Well, I'm very lucky. I work with some
great editors, and we're like pals now. But at first, when you're first writing and you've got your first editor ever, and because your first book you've probably worked on for 2, maybe 3 years, because it takes a long time to get published and stuff. So you've been rewriting this yourself for 2 or 3 years. So you get that first editor, and they say this is all wrong. You go, no, it's not. It's perfect the way it was. You turn into a little child. I'm not going to change anything. But now I've got great editors that I work with, and I've done it enough that I always tell kids it's like if you've ever been in a choir or on a sports team, or if you've been in a play, there's someone outside what you're doing, watching what you're doing. Like when I did plays, there's always a director who gave you notes afterwards, or in a choir, you're singing away and the choir director can hear something that you maybe you can't hear. So editors are like that. They have your best interest at heart, and they want to make your book as best as that you can make it, and they never forget that it's your book. I mean, you can, with editors, go, no, I'm not going to make that change. It would ruin my book. And I've never had to do that because I got really good editors. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky that way. Yes. And yes, yeah, sure.
Covers are wonderful. Can you tell us about the cover art of your book?
Well, this guy does these as Gilbert
Ford. You might recognize his style. He's on a lot of like the one about Tupelo. If you look for any books with silhouettes on it, a lot of his books have won like Newberries and awards and things. And he's very fussy, and he's a really talented guy. And he will only do books after he reads the book. Says, "Okay, I like this book." And then he'll do the cover. He's a really neat guy, too. I've gotten to know him a little bit, and I just love his style because it's subjective. And like we were talking earlier, like, who is this? Is this Kyle or is that Miguel? And you can read into it, where some book covers are so literal, like, here's what the hero looks like. And I like it better when kids can read and almost see themselves as the hero, and that's what the silhouette kind of takes away what exactly the kids look like. So yeah, that's Gilbert Ford, and he has some great picture books of his own. He did one about the Ferris wheel, that's really, really pretty. Yeah. Yes.
Can you tell us any stories about early failures?
Early failures. Well, those are my favorite
stories to talk about. Now I worked for. Yeah. Well, it's pretty hard because you get started and you say, I'm going to write a book. And fortunately, I have a great wife because I quit my job. I quit my job in advertising. I was an executive vice president, group creative director at Young and Rubicam, had all these business cards. And I just got tired of doing it. I said, I'm going to do like James Patterson did. I'm going because he was my first boss in advertising. That's why we write books together. And I just quit. I'm just quitting, and I had no money. And I said, honey, I'm staying home, and I'm going to write books. She said, good for you. I said, I'm not going to make any money. That's all right. Good for you. And I said, it might be a long time. That's okay as long as you're doing what you're doing. Good for you. So she gave me all support. And so I worked on my first book, The Prayer Circle, and I worked on it for a year. And I turned it in, and this agent liked it, and an editor liked it. And what happens when you sell a book, an editor has to fall in love with it. And then the editor has to take it to the publishing house and get every other editor and all the marketing department, sales department to fall in love with it too. So my first book got to that meeting, and then went, goodbye, and it got killed. So I said, honey, I'm going to write another book. She said, good for you. So I went ahead and wrote a second book, and nobody was even interested in that one, because the second book was a thinly veiled autobiography of my life, which is what everybody's first book usually is. So good, you go, off you go. Third book, it died. Yeah, third book. So 3 years now we've been doing this. And that's when I finally had that Chinese fortune cookie that said get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8. And I said, well, how did James Patterson get published? I mean, how did he become successful? Because I knew him in advertising. He did some books that were winning awards and things, but they weren't big bestsellers until he came up with Alex Cross and Kiss the Girls and that sort of thing. So I said, all right, I'm going to come up with a detective series, and they're going to be named after amusement park rides, and the first one's going to be Tilt-A-Whirl, the second one's going to be Mad Mouse, and it'll take place in New Jersey. And so I started plotted all that out. And so my fourth book, 4 years later, no money later, was the first one I sold for $5,000. So, yoo-hoo. And my wife said, good for you. And we all posed for pictures for that one. So that was in 2005. That was my first book. And now we're 2016. 37 books have been published since then. So, yeah, I do like 3 a year. But half of those are Patterson books, and he does more than half of the work when I work on those. Yeah. Got to keep going and have a good wife. That's the secret to life. Yes? No. My adult mysteries were done by a small company called Carroll and Graff, which actually doesn't even exist anymore. And then some others were done by St. Martin's. And then the James Patterson books, he works with Little Brown. So I work for James Patterson, not his publisher. Then my Riley Mack and the other known Troublemakers books were done by HarperCollins. But most of my big books have been with Random House. So I'm very happy at my Random House home. Yes?
Do you work collaboratively?
Very well, don't you think?
No. I think so. But does he write something and you write something? Does he write something?
He comes over to my apartment. My wife makes us a pot of coffee. He puts his peanut butter. With Jim,
because he does 14 books a year. We call him Jim because that's what we used to call him back in advertising. I think he does 14, maybe even more books a year. Plus he's got movies, he's got games, he's got television shows going on. So, but he just has this file like this thick of ideas. And he gets these ideas, and he'll call me up and say, I got this idea about a girl. She's like a middle child, 6 sisters, and she's a troublemaker, and her name's Jackie Ha Ha, and she climbs the Ferris wheel in New Jersey, and she's always getting in trouble, but then she turns out to be an actress. And I thought, that sounds pretty cool, Jim. All right, yeah, let me get an idea. And then he goes and he writes like an 80-page outline on the idea with all the twists and turns, so like chapter 1. We meet this, we do this, chapter 2. So he gives me this 80-page outline. Then every month I execute against that outline, and I'll write about 10,000 words, which I think given his formatting is like 80 to 100 pages, and I send it to him on a Monday, let's say. He'll call me up by Wednesday with a detailed analysis of those 10,000 words. And usually it's, this is great, take a look at chapter 6. I heard the adult in the room, get rid of that, make it more kid-friendly. And watch out with this, it's getting a little too long and sappy. And then I'll move forward another 10,000 words, and we'll do that every month for 4 months. Then he takes what I've done, basically the first draft, and then he does a final draft by himself. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then we do it again. It's kind of fun. Yes?
Beginning of your first Lemoncello book, Kyle Keeley talked about how he loved Mr. Lemoncello's games. Do you think maybe Mr. Lemoncello's games will ever come to life?
Well, every time I do a signing like this, kids ask me that. And what was cool is when the book launched in New York City, I invited all the people from Random House Children's Book, and the president of the whole division came and stuff, and 2 kids. And I've been telling them for years, kids want to play these games. We need to design these games. And they were in the audience, they heard, and they said, Chris, we needed to design some games. So maybe they're going to try to talk to some merchandising people. And I'm not sure how the game world works, but it'd be kind of cool if there was a Lemoncello game. I hope so. A whole line of them. And maybe when Nickelodeon does the movie, if they do the movie, maybe they'll do some games too. That would be pretty cool. Are you listening, Nickelodeon? Do some games. Well, Well, it's been fun talking to you guys. I apologize again for my voice. It's been a long tour, but this was a lot of fun to be here with you guys, and I'm happy to sign any books you have and ones you brought in and that kind of stuff. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you. My wife's watching. Here it comes.
Like to personalize or purchase, just call the number on your screen and we will ship it to you wherever you are in the U.S. Thank you all for tuning in.